Hello and welcome to this special broadcast from the Policy Center for the New South, recorded on the sidelines of the African Peace and Security Annual Conference. Today, we explore a fundamental question at the heart of Africa's evolving position in the international system. Is the continent aligning with the new world order or beginning to shape it? To help us explore this evolving landscape, I'm joined by Professor Chris Alden, Director of LAC Ideas at the London School of Economics. Professor Alden, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's begin by situating this moment geopolitically. The international order is shifting. We're talking about reconfiguration, fragmentation, new blocs competing, and redefinition of influence. From your perspective, Professor, what are the key features of this transition, and specifically, how does it reframe the strategic space available to African countries?
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. I think that the key features of this transition first are that it's not a steady line. It's more stops and starts. It's more sort of pitches and falls. And I think that sense of crisis which creeps up on us and strikes us has moved what had been trends perhaps 2 years ago and accelerated some aspects of them, or in some cases put a brake on other trends. So the general trend continues, the mega trend, if you like, but they're punctuated by different crises, of which the current one in Iran and Israel and the like is just but one of a number of examples that have happened so far. Insofar as this is an opportunity for that was your question, right? In terms of Africa, I think that there is a view that crises do offer opportunities. I think they can, but I don't think it's a given. I think that you have to recognize in the crisis something that can further your interests or what have you, and then have the capacity to act upon it. So I think that African analysis has to look at these crises carefully and say, in what way does this offer Africa an advantage? It's not a given, so it has to be understood, analyzed, and then review one's own capacity to act.
Mm-hmm. Zooming in from this global picture, let's focus on the posture, the strategic posture African states are adopting in response to this reordering.
Yes, I think that, this has come up in our conference. The strategic posture is no greater than the sum of the parts of Africa in some way. In other words, it's an old adage to talk about there's not an Africa, there are many Africas, or there are many constituent parts. And I think that the degree that the continent has a strategic partner is partly defined by the ability to cooperate between governments, to have a shared vision. The African Union obviously represents the center point of that, but also the member states constitute the if you like, the mechanism through which all of this is going to emerge as a policy, as a strategic posture. I think that what we see Africa doing is saying, look, this is a world that's in motion. This is an ebbing of certain actors and a rising of other actors. Are we prepared in this setting? Is Africa prepared in this setting to put forward, to take a bet, if you like, on where the world is going? Who are the actors, or which are the sectors that matter? And for instance, critical minerals. That's something that all the parties out there, the great powers, because it's so linked to the green transition and things like that. So how can Africa recognize its significance as a player in the resource sector, longstanding, but align it with the commercial drive that is and the climate necessity of green energy. So how coordinating and doing that, I think, is a very important example of a strategic posture towards a certain area sector.
And do you see that African actors, whether are a certain rules of engagement or responding to frameworks set elsewhere?
I think it's a bit of both, of course. Africa is not the Africa of a generation or two ago, where it really was a passive. It was a norms taker. It was seeking compliance where it could and thought that alignment was the best route. That Africa, I'm happy to say, is less prevalent. I'm going to say it's gone, but it's less prevalent. In a way, connecting your question to what we were talking about a moment ago, adopting a strategic posture and recognizing opportunity, it may be that in the area of norms shaping that Africa will have it's the most consequential moment for Africa, saying that we, around any given issues out there, that Africa can take this moment of uncertainty, reinforce international law, reinforce cooperation through its own actions. It has the largest regional voting bloc in the United Nations. Restore and enforce, insist, in fact, that multilateralism plays a leading role where Africa has the biggest voice. I think that would be a general important position to take in this moment of change. And Africa has the tools. It may not have the military tools to do other things in military domain, but it does in this area.
You mentioned multilateral institutions. We have multipolar influence, norms, and reforms. Many African countries are calling in this context for reform of multilateral institutions, from the UN Security Council to the global financial architecture. In this process of reform, how realistic is it to expect these structures to evolve in ways that reflect African realities?
I think that, again, this is an opportunity to reform is now a necessity. It's been debated in a sort of coffee room kind of way, but this is a necessity. The system is breaking down. The irrelevance of the Security Council in matters of great consequence, conflict and what have you, it is evident. Again, Africa has a largest voice. I think that unified position, and I can't imagine, there are many issues around which different African governments will have disputes with one another, but this is one where I think there is really the basis for shared unity and action. And in that process of pressuring the United Nations and the multilateral system you said reform? Absolutely. Well, at this stage, I'd almost, just get on with the regular business, not even, stop opting out, stop not being a part of what is necessary to solve the crises that we experience. So I see African pressure, collective pressure on both getting the UN to work again, and secondly, to do so in a way that embraces reform and African interests is critical.
And in this process of reform, do you see a risk of fragmentation or a new kind of African consensus emerging?
Yes, I think that if it comes to the specifics of the Security Council and seats on the Security Council, there are divisions there within Africa. There's a consensus that was struck in South Africa some years ago, but is best recognized for its inoperability, frankly. A rotational seat and that kind of thing. So I think that hard choices need to be made amongst governments. But I think that ultimately don't let reform be hostage to individual national pursuits. That seems to me has to be the larger goal here.
Professor Alden, thank you very much for your clarifications. Let's end with a forward-looking thought. If you had to identify one critical challenge and one strategic opportunity to Africa in the next decade, what would it be and why?
You know, I still would say, because it's kind of fallen off our agenda, but the climate issue underpins everything in terms of the viability of African countries, their economies, and the like. So I think let's not forget that one. In fact, let's keep that as a very large and important issue that informs our thinking in all sorts of areas. Opportunities. I do come back to our point that I think the question of UN reform is an opportunity that Africa can, for the first time in perhaps in the continent, in the modern history, play a role to help shape this very important institution.
Professor Alden, thank you very much for your insights and for clarity and depth you brought to this conversation. And to you, our audience, thank you for watching, and stay with us for more high-level conversations throughout APSACO as we continue exploring the forces shaping Africa's strategic future. Until next time.